A breakup with a narcissist rarely begins with a clean ending. It often starts in silence, in confusion, in the uneasy feeling that something has ended, but nothing feels resolved. You may walk away carrying more questions than answers, wondering how something that once felt so powerful could leave you feeling so small. This kind of ending does not simply break a relationship, it disrupts your sense of reality, your trust in your instincts, and your understanding of love itself. Tonight, I want to speak not about blame or diagnosis, but about what happens inside us when a bond built on intensity and imbalance finally falls apart, and why understanding this experience is not about looking back, but about learning how to move forward with clarity and self respect. A breakup with a narcissist often feels unfinished because closure is not simply absent by accident, it is deliberately withheld as part of the relational pattern that existed from the beginning. In these relationships, clarity was never freely given. Conversations circled without resolution, accountability was avoided, and emotional truths were blurred. When the relationship ends, this same structure remains in place, leaving you with unanswered questions and a lingering sense that something important was never said or acknowledged. Closure would require reflection, empathy, and responsibility, all of which threaten the narcissist's carefully protected self-image. Instead of honest dialogue, you may encounter silence, sudden disappearance, or contradictory messages that reopen emotional wounds. One moment they may act indifferent, as if the relationship meant nothing, and the next they may resurface with warmth or nostalgia. This inconsistency keeps you emotionally engaged, replaying memories and conversations in an attempt to make sense of what happened. The lack of a clear ending can feel destabilizing because the human mind seeks coherence, especially after emotional investment. Without a definitive conclusion, the nervous system remains alert, scanning for meaning, replaying the past, and searching for emotional resolution that never arrives. What makes this particularly painful is that you may believe closure depends on their explanation or acknowledgement. You might wait for an apology, an admission of harm, or even a calm conversation that validates your experience. But closure offered by a narcissist often comes with conditions, deflection, or subtle blame. They may frame the breakup as your fault, minimize the impact of their behavior, or rewrite the story entirely. This not only denies you emotional resolution, but also reinforces self-doubt, making you question your memory, your reactions, and your worth. The unfinished feeling can also stem from how the relationship began. Many narcissistic relationships start with intensity, rapid bonding, and promises of a future that felt certain and meaningful. When such a relationship ends abruptly or cruelly, the contrast is shocking. Your mind struggles to reconcile the early idealization with the later devaluation. The absence of closure leaves these two realities floating side by side, never fully integrated, creating an emotional loop that is hard to exit. Over time, the work becomes internal rather than relational. Closure does not come from their understanding, but from yours. It emerges slowly as you accept that the lack of answers is itself an answer, that the confusion you feel mirrors the confusion you lived in, and that clarity does not require their participation, but begins the moment you stop waiting for them to explain what they never intended to face. After a breakup with a narcissist, the emotional push and pull often intensifies rather than fades, leaving you disoriented and emotionally exhausted. This dynamic is familiar because it mirrors the rhythm of the relationship itself. One moment you may be met with warmth, charm, or apparent remorse, and the next with coldness, blame, or rage. These rapid shifts are not random emotional fluctuations, but a continuation of the control pattern that once kept you psychologically attached. Even after separation, the narcissist may seek to regulate their sense of power by keeping you emotionally responsive. Charm frequently reappears when they sense you are pulling away or reclaiming your independence. They may suddenly sound reflective, affectionate, or self aware, saying things that resemble accountability without actually taking responsibility. This can stir hope and confusion, especially if you long for the version of them who once made you feel seen and valued. Your mind may interpret these moments as evidence that the relationship could have been saved or that they have finally changed. In reality, this charm is often situational rather than transformative, designed to draw you back into emotional engagement. Guilt is another powerful tool in this push and pull. You may be reminded of their pain, their loneliness, or the ways they claim you failed them. They might frame themselves as misunderstood or abandoned, subtly implying that your decision to leave caused their suffering. This can activate your empathy and sense of responsibility, especially if you were conditioned during the relationship to prioritize their emotional needs over your own. You may feel compelled to comfort them, explain yourself again, or soften your boundaries even when you know contact is harmful. Anger often follows when charm and guilt fail. Rage, accusations, or cruel remarks may surface, leaving you shaken and questioning your decision. This anger is not about the breakup itself, but about the loss of influence. When control slips, emotional volatility becomes a way to reassert dominance or provoke a reaction. Even negative attention can feel preferable to indifference because it confirms that they still matter in your emotional world. Sudden vulnerability can be the most confusing part of all. Tears, confessions, or expressions of despair may appear unexpectedly, making you wonder if you misjudged them. Yet this vulnerability often lacks consistency and accountability, appearing only when it serves to pull you back in. Over time, recognizing this push and pull allows you to see that the emotional chaos is not a sign of unresolved love, but a signal that distance is necessary for your stability and self-trust. When a narcissist experiences a breakup, the loss they feel is rarely centered on emotional connection or mutual attachment. What is shaken most deeply is their sense of control, identity, and dominance within the relationship. For them, the bond was not simply about loving another person, but about maintaining a position of power where their needs, perceptions, and emotions define the reality of the relationship. When you leave, that structure collapses, and the breakup becomes less about missing you and more about losing the influence they once held over you. Control in these relationships often appears subtle. It may have looked like emotional dependency, constant reassurance, or the quiet expectation that you would adapt yourself to their moods and priorities. Over time, you may have learned to anticipate their reactions, soften your words, or silence your needs to keep peace. This dynamic allowed them to feel stable and superior without openly asserting dominance. When the relationship ends, this unspoken system of control is disrupted, leaving them feeling exposed and destabilized. This is why their reactions after the breakup can feel disproportionate or confusing. If they truly loved you in a healthy way, your absence would invite grief, reflection, and sadness. Instead, you may see obsession with winning, retaliation, or proving that they are unaffected. They might seek to replace you quickly, flaunt new relationships, or emphasize how easily they moved on. These behaviors are not signs of healing or emotional resilience, but attempts to restore a fractured sense of control and self-worth by demonstrating that they are still desired and untouchable. You may also notice that their focus remains fixed on your response rather than their own feelings. They may monitor your reactions, test your boundaries, or attempt to provoke jealousy or guilt. This is because the true loss lies in no longer being able to shape your emotions or narrative. When you stop engaging, stop explaining, or stop reacting, the absence of control becomes even more painful than the loss of the relationship itself. For you, understanding this distinction can be deeply liberating. It helps explain why apologies feel hollow, why vulnerability appears and disappears, and why genuine accountability is rare. The breakup threatens their identity more than their heart. Recognizing that the relationship was organized around control rather than connection allows you to stop personalizing their behavior. It was never about your worth or your ability to love enough. It was about a dynamic that required you to shrink so they could feel powerful. And when that dynamic ends, what they mourn most is not you, but the control they can no longer exercise. After a breakup with a narcissist, many people are unsettled by how deeply their body continues to react long after the relationship has ended. Even when the mind understands that leaving was necessary, the nervous system may still crave the intensity that once defined the connection. This is because the relationship trained your emotional responses through cycles of excitement, unpredictability, and relief. Over time, these highs and lows created a powerful biochemical attachment where adrenaline, cortisol, and dopamine became intertwined with feelings you labeled as love. In such dynamics, calm moments were often scarce or short-lived. Stability may have felt boring or unfamiliar, while chaos felt alive and meaningful. When affection followed conflict, your body learned to associate emotional relief with closeness. This conditioning makes it difficult to separate genuine love from emotional activation. After the breakup, the absence of constant stimulation can feel like emptiness rather than peace, leading you to question whether you truly love them or whether something essential is missing in your life. This confusion is intensified by how the relationship began. Idealization creates a sense of being deeply seen and chosen, activating powerful emotional responses early on. Your nervous system registered this intensity as safety and belonging, even though it was unsustainable. When that intensity disappears, the body may interpret the loss as danger rather than liberation. You may feel restless, anxious, or emotionally flat, mistaking these withdrawal symptoms for longing or proof that the relationship mattered more than it actually did. Memories of the highs often resurface more vividly than the harm. Your mind may replay moments of passion, laughter, or connection while minimizing the anxiety, self-doubt, and emotional erosion that followed. This selective recall is not denial, but a survival response. The nervous system seeks familiar patterns, even painful ones, because familiarity once meant predictability. Without awareness, this can draw you back toward the relationship or into similar dynamics, chasing intensity rather than emotional safety. Healing involves gently retraining the nervous system to recognize that love does not have to feel overwhelming to be real. It allows room for quiet connection, consistency, and mutual respect without the constant surge of emotional drama. As your body slowly recalibrates, you begin to understand that what felt like love was often survival, and that peace, though unfamiliar at first, is not emptiness, but the foundation upon which genuine intimacy can finally grow. After a breakup with a narcissist, it is common to feel as though your shared history is being rewritten in real time. Events you remember clearly may be denied, distorted, or reframed in ways that leave you questioning your own memory. This rewriting of history is not accidental. It is a defense mechanism designed to protect the narcissist's self-image and avoid accountability. Accepting responsibility for harm would require acknowledging flaws, and instead, the narrative is reshaped so they emerge as the wronged party. Smear campaigns often grow out of this need to control the story. You may discover that mutual friends, family members, or even strangers have been told a version of events in which you are portrayed as unstable, cruel, or ungrateful. Private moments are taken out of context, and your emotional reactions to mistreatment are presented as proof of your supposed failings. This can feel deeply violating, as if your inner life has been exposed and distorted without your consent. The purpose of these campaigns is not simply revenge. They serve to reinforce the narcissist's sense of superiority while isolating you from potential support. By shaping how others see you, they attempt to maintain influence even after the relationship has ended. When you feel misunderstood or disbelieved, you may be tempted to defend yourself, explain every detail, or correct every lie. This reaction is understandable, but it often keeps you emotionally entangled in the very dynamic you are trying to leave. What makes this experience especially painful is the grief of losing not just the relationship, but the shared reality you thought you had. When someone rewrites the past, it can feel like an erasure of your truth. You may begin to doubt your own perception, wondering if you were too harsh, too sensitive, or simply wrong. This self-doubt is one of the most damaging legacies of narcissistic relationships, and it can linger long after external contact has ended. Over time, healing involves recognizing that you do not need to participate in their version of the story to validate your own. Your truth does not require consensus to be real. As you step away from the need to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding you, you reclaim your sense of self. The narrative they spread loses its power when you stop trying to correct it, and your energy returns to rebuilding a life grounded in integrity, clarity, and self-trust. Healing after a breakup with a narcissist does not begin the moment the relationship ends. It begins when you stop trying to be understood by the person who caused the harm. For a long time, your emotional energy may have been invested in explaining yourself, justifying your feelings, and hoping that if you found the right words, they would finally see you clearly. This effort slowly pulls you away from your own inner truth and places your sense of reality in someone else's hands. Reclaiming your narrative means bringing that authority back to yourself. In narcissistic dynamics, your story was often interrupted, minimized, or reframed. Your emotions may have been labeled as overreactions, your boundaries as selfishness, and your needs as unreasonable. Over time, you may have learned to edit your own experience to avoid conflict or rejection. After the breakup, this internalized voice can remain, questioning your decisions and urging you to seek validation from the very person who dismissed you. Healing requires recognizing that this voice was learned, not inherent, and that it no longer needs to guide you. Reclaiming your narrative involves honoring what you lived through without requiring agreement or acknowledgement from anyone else. It means allowing yourself to name the harm honestly, even if others never do. This process can feel uncomfortable because it asks you to trust your perception after a long period of doubt. You may feel tempted to soften the truth or rationalize their behavior, especially if you still hold compassion for their wounds. Compassion, however, does not require self-erasure. You can understand someone's pain without denying your own. As you reconnect with your story, you begin to notice how your sense of self slowly strengthens. Your memories become clearer, your emotions more coherent, and your boundaries more natural. You stop measuring your healing by whether they regret losing you or acknowledge their mistakes. Instead, you measure it by how safe you feel in your own body and how freely you express your needs and values. This shift marks a profound internal realignment. The relationship no longer defines who you are or what you deserve. Your worth is no longer negotiated through conflict or validation. In reclaiming your narrative, you move from surviving someone else's version of you to inhabiting your own truth fully, where healing is no longer about repair but about return. A breakup with a narcissist ultimately asks you to confront not only the loss of a person, but the loss of an illusion. It reveals how deeply intensity can disguise itself as love and how control can masquerade as connection. What lingers after such a relationship is not weakness or longing, but the residue of a bond that was built on imbalance rather than mutuality. As you move forward, the work is not to make sense of their behavior or wait for clarity from them, but to turn inward and listen to what your experience has been trying to tell you all along. Healing unfolds when you stop chasing closure, stop explaining your pain, and begin to trust your own reality. In that quiet reclaiming of self, you discover that love does not need to destabilize you to be real, and that the end of this relationship is not a failure, but the beginning of a more honest and grounded way of relating to yourself and to others.